Your college football game day has come early.
Goes down the field for Sicky, goes up high. He's got get away from the top speed, and the ball is free. Woo! What a hit! You got barbecue back there.
From underdog triumphs to powerhouse showdowns, we've got your winning playbook covered. It's BetQLU with Chris Mack, RJ Choppy, and John Martin, presented by BetMGM, the sportsbook born in Vegas. Download the app today. Please gamble responsibly.
Well, if you weren't forced by your family this past weekend to throw up holiday decorations like some of us were, you might have no idea that we've entered the month of November. But here we are nonetheless, the final 4 weeks of the college football regular season. We are ready to go with Week 11. We got 4 big matchups, 2 SEC, 2 Big 12 to preview, and some possible upsets to look ahead to this weekend as well, because last week seemed to be the week of the upset in a lot of spots. We've got a bracket to talk about. My God, we got a lot going on. Live coast to coast on the BetQL network. This is BetQLU every Friday night, Saturday morning, always in podcast form inside your Odyssey app, AUDACY. John Martin off this week alongside my guy, RJ Choppy. I'm Chris Mack. And Choppy, let's start there. Well, before we get to the bracket, let's talk rankings, right? Because in order to have a bracket, you got to have rankings first. You can't have seeds without rankings, even though they're not the same. And I still saw people on social media, RJ, who Tuesday night, and there was a lot going on Tuesday night, were mystified by the fact that the seeds and the rankings didn't necessarily match in all of these instances. Yeah, that's the way this is going to work, kids. So hopefully you've been following along with that handy tutorial that ESPN made Kirk Herbstreit record this summer that seems to play every single week and will continue to play every single week. There are rankings. Oregon number 1, Ohio State number 2, Georgia number 3, Miami number 4, and then I'll go 5 through 12 very quickly. Texas, Penn State, Tennessee, Indiana, BYU, Notre Dame, Alabama, Boise State. Now, that does not necessarily compute to brackets, which we'll get into the specific matchups in just a second. But as far as rankings go, every single one of those 12 teams now favorited at BetMGM to make the college football playoff. Even if it's a lower number, like Alabama's minus 125. Still favorited to make the playoffs. Heck, even SMU, who's right outside the picture looking in, ranked 13th, is minus 105 to make the playoff. So let's start there. The initial rankings, RJ, what'd you think of them? Is it even worth arguing? I saw BYU fans were up in arms. They don't feel like they got enough respect. Indiana fans are still annoyed that they're not getting enough respect. Is it even worth arguing about these things with 4 weeks of football
left? It's worth arguing from the standpoint that if you're BYU and you're Indiana, you've never really been in an argument to begin with. So, you know, you're being talked about for the first time. Fans of Georgia and Alabama and Ohio State, they're in this every year. They know not to worry about that. They know not to get all up in arms about where the rankings are on the first week of November. They're more worried about where the rankings are on the first week of December, and then the first week of January, for that matter. So that's what they really care about. So, I mean, is it worth it? Yeah, absolutely, it's worth arguing about because, you know, if you're a team that isn't in the Big Ten and the SEC, you've been told where you stand. You just have.
Yeah, I mean, in BYU's case, definitely, right? Like, congratulations. Right. You're leading the Big 12. You're still barely a top 10 team. Indiana, you're undefeated still. Oh, that's nice. Golf clap. You're 8th in the country. You're both behind multiple teams who have at least one loss. So that's just the way of the world, and that's what you're going to have to swim upstream against if you're a BYU in the Big 12's case. Look, outside of Miami in the ACC, if you're, I mentioned SMU, if you're Clemson, right, who now has 2 losses, I guess that's not as good of an argument to make. But, there are teams that Sure, if you want to just go by record, fine, you can go by record, but that's still not the way this thing is going to work. There's still going to be subjectivity brought into these rankings. And I think maybe that's what was lost on some people is they thought, 12-team field rankings. We're just going to go by record. No. So you still got to understand there's subjectivity involved in all of this.
Oh, for sure. And these are still humans making these rankings. And,
right.
You could see the videos of them at the Gaylord Texan in Grapevine, the hotel. That's where they do all these rankings. They're there every I don't know, do they fly in or they just live here now? I have no idea what's going on with this. But, they're there and they're doing their rankings and they've all got their computers in front of them, but it's all very subjective still. They can have all the data that they want in front of them. They're still having to make a decision, and their decisions at best are still 55-45, 60-40, this team or that team, right? There's no absolutes. The absolute is Oregon, absolutely is better than the 12th ranked team today. That's an absolute. But when you get down to Indiana and you get down to Tennessee and SMU and BYU and, you think who's better, and we probably have an idea, but you're still looking at 6 of 10 at best?
Yeah, and I still think, look, they did this when it was only a 4-team field, and they're going to continue to do this in the world of a 12-team field. They look ahead. You can't tell me they don't. They know that the undefeated Hoosiers still have yet to play Ohio State. And so they're going to put Indiana in a spot where if Indiana loses to Ohio State, they're going to be this close to falling out, if not out of the top 12, right? That's just the way they're going to play because they don't believe in Indiana. However, they've also got Indiana in a spot where if they win, they solidify themselves a playoff spot if they beat Ohio State and win out. And, it doesn't matter what happens in the Big Ten championship game then. And that's exactly where they've placed them. Now, I do understand, to a certain extent, if I'm a BYU fan, with what's left on their schedule, you're telling me right now we're number 9 in the country. We've got very limited opportunity left to make up ground, right? Okay, we got Utah this weekend, and we'll get into that game in a couple minutes. And then we got what? Kansas, Arizona State. Who's their finale against? Houston, right? So they don't play anybody really once they get through Utah this weekend. And you could probably make an argument that outside of their defense, Utah isn't much this year either because Cam Rising is hurt. Surprise, surprise. So if you're a BYU fan, I understand. You're looking at it as, man, we probably got to run the table and win a conference championship game. We got to go 13-0 just to get in a 12-team field based on being ranked 9th right now. I understand some frustration from BYU fans this weekend, to be totally honest.
Yeah, I get it. I do. I think the problem with BYU, I think BYU gets a little bit of Colorado Rockies treatment. They're elite at home in the altitude. How are they on the road? If they're undefeated, they're not going to get let's be fair. If BYU makes the playoff, they're going to be in the playoff as the Big 12 champ with a bye, without a home game. So is BYU going to win a neutral site game as the 4 seed over Texas? No, they're going to be a 10-point underdog.
Yeah.
Right? They're going to be a 10-point underdog.
Yeah, and they actually have played well on the road this year. Obviously, they haven't lost any games yet, so they haven't lost on the road either. But again, this is the test, right? The Holy War on the road against the Utes, a game that we'll get into again in just a couple of minutes. And you mentioned a projected line there, what's it look like? And we actually have some of those, some projected lines from You Better You Bet this week, where these lines were cooked up by the Action Network for these 4 projected first-round matchups based on this week's rankings. So the 4 projected first-round matchups would be 8-9 Indiana, Tennessee in Knoxville, would be 7-10 Notre Dame, Penn State, in-state college, Happy Valley, 11-6 Alabama visiting the Horns in Austin, and 12-5 would be Boise visiting the Buckeyes in Columbus. And the lines go as such. The closest, Penn State laying just 3.5 to Notre Dame. You've got Tennessee laying 6.5 to Indiana, Texas laying 7.5 to Bama, and Ohio State laying 17.5 to Boise in a first-round playoff game. Any of those way off in your opinion, RJ? Like, I think Boise State, Ohio State 17.5 is a bit. I'm taking the points, to be honest, in that matchup. I'm taking Boise in the 17.5.
That's too much. I think the Penn State Notre Dame one, I don't really know what to make of either team, to be honest with you. I think both teams have flaws. Is that a night game? Mm-hmm. Is it a night game? And it's going to be bad weather. That's the one thing Penn State's going to have. And I don't know. I know you live in that area. Is that going to be at Penn State's campus? Because there was that talk.
Yeah, no, Pat completely made that up. I don't know where Pat's coming from with that, McAfee. Right. That's complete garbage. Yeah, no, they're going to play. It's why they've started work on Beaver Stadium already, and they're going through a huge, $75 million, no, more than that. Okay. It's a big number, renovation. Right. So they're going to play that game in Happy Valley.
That's a massive disadvantage if they didn't. It's a huge advantage to play at your stadium. So, yeah, I think Penn State clearly is the favorite. I mean, Tennessee they don't blow teams out. That would be a very high-scoring game. The Texas-Alabama one is the most interesting to me because, Texas and Oklahoma in the first year in the SEC, they're going to Texas plays Florida this weekend, right? Mm-hmm. Normally, if Texas is playing a team that they're a 22.5-point favorite against in the Big 12, you almost take them. But I really don't know. It's a grind in this conference. Yeah. And Alabama's a good team. They're good. They're not as good as Texas, but they're a good squad. I have very little feel on that game, that Texas-Alabama game at 7.5.
That hook would keep me away from it. It would, because it feels like you said, all four of these games, maybe not Boise, OSU, but at least the other three, Notre Dame, Penn State, Bama, Texas, Indiana, Tennessee, based on this week's bracket, all of those would be one-possession games. I don't see any of those turning into maybe, if Notre Dame's offense really struggles, like you mentioned, maybe it's in the elements. At night in State College. Maybe you see Penn State pulling away for a 10-point victory late. I don't know. But most of these games would be one-possession games. I could even see Boise State making it a one-possession game, backdooring something close against Ohio State. That's why I would never lay the 17.5. And that's not just a bitter Penn State fan after last week saying that. That's really, we're going to ask Will Howard to put that many points on the board. I get it. It's a group of 5 team, but we're going to ask Will Howard to put that many points on the board. I would not trust it. But my best bet out of that projected first round would be Boise plus the 17.5. Yeah. And I do think, there'd definitely be an under in play in Notre Dame, Penn State. Definitely be overs in play, I think, in Bama, Texas, depending what the number would be set at, and Indiana, Tennessee. Those teams are going to score points. And I think that's what's going to be most interesting to watch is the clashing of styles. Indiana, Tennessee, again, I would have pegged as both teams in the 30s. But Indiana has shown at times where they can shut you down, and Nico maybe shows up and throws a pick or gets irresponsible with the football. Yep. That's been known to happen this year. So I just like the fact that there seems to be my initial knee-jerk reaction to all 4 of these prospective matchups. And then I do pause for a second and say, yeah, but that gives me hope that all of these games are going to be close and really fun to watch.
They're going to be. And this is why the 12-team playoff should have happened 20 years ago.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, and I was wrong. I thought, boy, this is going to really diminish the regular season. No, what this does is this gives us 25 teams to talk about now.
Yes.
But last year we talked about at this time of year, 10 teams. At most. Right? Because you had a couple of one-loss teams that were still good. They could make a run. There's still 4 or 5 games left, whatever. Now, you're talking 20 to 25 teams. You can really make a case.
Yeah, we're just talking about, I'm looking at the 20th ranked team right now in Colorado, and we're going to get into the Buffs in a second, but they've got a backdoor shot at making the playoff in that chaotic Big 12. We saw Pitt get blown out last week, but hell, in the ACC, who knows what may happen week to week. They're 22 to 1 right now to make the playoff, but you get our gist here, which is you're right. anything's possible, and there's a whole lot more teams to talk about, which we will do with 4 big games this weekend. A couple in the SEC could lead to some eliminations of sort, as we've got teams on the brink with 2 losses already. We mentioned the Buffs. They've got a big one on the road against the team coming off a huge upset. We mentioned the Holy War between BYU and Utah. All of it on the way as we get you ready for the first week of the final month of the regular season in the 2024 season. College football reaching its peak this year. Alongside RJ Choppy, John Martin off this week, I'm Chris Mack. This is BetQLU.
You've been listening to BetQLU, presented by BetMGM. If you missed any of the show, listen back anytime on the new and improved Odyssey app.
Are you ready, sir? Start your engines. Let's go.
Astros money line versus the Marlins. Johnny Cueto, no thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. How does this affect me personally?
Which is absolutely bonkers to me.
If you do the middle school math, is 117 yards per game that you gotta post each and every weekend.
I knew it.
Who has the upper hand? Do we think it's going to be the offenses, or do we think it's going to be the defenses?
How about Saturday's game? Let's just throw a random game out here.
Like, I don't want to put faith in NC State. There's a chance we'll lose
13.
outright. Who knows? Jinx is definitely not paying attention right now. He's just vibing to the music.
Are you ready for the most interactive sports gambling show? Introducing BetQL's Send It In with PJ Glasser. We want to hear from you. Send It In is about your picks, your trends, and your fades. Share your thoughts, predictions, and your best daily best bets with the Send It In community. Set your reminders, mark your calendars, and get ready to send it in on weekday afternoons at 1 Eastern on Twitter, YouTube, and Twitch. On your home for wagertainment, the BetQL Network, presented by BetMGM.
Go for the betting cycle on BetQL with Cody Decker,
Cody Decker, former professional baseball player, turned professional smartass on the radio.
sports handicapper Rob Brown,
When Penix Jr. plays USC, he's getting 400 yards.
cycling all the top plays,
And Cody Decker, I think Florida can cover today.
and one outrageous show parlay.
1, 2, 3.
Let the chaos begin. It's Bet for the Cycle on the BetQL Network, presented by BetMGM.
Some would say that maybe he'll be chasing Super Bowl MVP. Really makes me angry that, like, Knicks fans can't have anything. We've been bad for... I get it. Now it's, okay, 100% of attention on 9 million games tonight. It's a playoff game! We've seen this movie before, and we know how it ends. And it ends with absolute disaster. But I'll tell you, that's fun. But the most fun thing about betting on sports for me is this. Like, hey, there's no tomorrow. And now, come on, put Pickett in.
Are you ready, sir? Start your engines. Let's go.
Astros money line versus the Marlins. Johnny Cueto, no thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. How does this affect me personally?
Which is absolutely bonkers to me.
If you do the middle school math, is 117 yards per game that you gotta post each and every weekend.
I knew it.
Who has the upper hand? Do we think it's going to be the offenses, or do we think it's going to be the defenses?
How about Saturday's game? Let's just throw a random game out here.
Like, I don't want to put faith in NC State. There's a chance we'll lose
13.
outright. Who knows? Jinx is definitely not paying attention right now. He's just vibing to the music.
Are you ready for the most interactive sports gambling show? Introducing BetQL's Send It In with PJ Glasser. We want to hear from you. Send It In is about your picks, your trends, and your fades. Share your thoughts, predictions, and your best daily best bets with the Send It In community. Set your reminders, mark your calendars, and get ready to send Send It In on weekday afternoons at 1 Eastern on Twitter, YouTube, and Twitch. On your home for wagertainment, the BetQL Network, presented by BetMGM.
Some would say that maybe he'll be chasing Super Bowl MVP. Really makes me angry that, like, Knicks fans can't have anything. We've been bad for... I get it. Now it's, okay, 100% of attention on 9 million games tonight. It's a playoff game! We've seen this movie before, and we know how it ends. And it ends with absolute disaster. But I'll tell you, that's fun. But the most fun thing about betting on sports for me is this. Like, hey, there's no tomorrow. And now, come on, pick it in.
Let's get back to BetQLU, presented by BetMGM.
Here we are. It's week 11, BetQLU, live coast to coast on the BetQL network. Don't forget you can watch the show as well on YouTube, on the Odyssey Sports channel, alongside my guy RJ Choppy. I'm Chris Mack. John Martin has the week off. We are BetQLU, presented by BetMGM, the sportsbook born in Vegas. It's week 11 already. I don't know where the first 10 weeks went, but they have been chaotic, especially in the Big 12. And we will get to some big Big 12 games in just a moment. There's an SEC game with two programs that I don't want to say everybody just assumed would be in the playoff this year, but we assumed they would be in the playoff this year. And now one of them is basically out of the running after Saturday night. We'll get into Bama LSU in just a couple minutes as well. But let's start in Oxford, RJ. Saturday afternoon, 3:30 Eastern, 2:30 Central. The number 16 Rebels hosting the number 2 Georgia Bulldogs. Georgia, they've got some wiggle room here. They are still fighting for that positioning at the top of the SEC, trying to secure that spot at the top of the conference and a shot at the bye that comes with a win in the SEC title game. For Ole Miss, though, make no mistake, this is a must-win game. This is win or not go home. You got a few regular season games left, but this is a lose and no, you won't be in the playoff kind of game. They've got to come up with a massive upset against Georgia. Now, the trends don't go in their direction. Ole Miss has won once in their last 12 against Georgia, and they've lost 11 in a row against top 5 teams. What I guess has to be maybe a saving grace, a hope of some sort, is that Carson Beck has looked extremely average and wildly inconsistent at best for the last 2.5 months now. This guy was once being pegged as a Heisman hopeful, as a first-round draft pick, and now, no, he's not either one of those. Jackson Dart's the better quarterback in this matchup, Choppy. I just don't know if that's enough against Georgia's defense for Ole Miss to pull off the upset, the spread at 2.5.
This is a really weird one because there are times when you look at Ole Miss and like, oh, okay. And there are times where you look at Ole Miss and you just don't understand. Like last week when they beat Arkansas by like 30, I was stunned. Like that's not the Arkansas team that beat Tennessee or has had other good games. That was quite stunning to me. That said, Ole Miss, and I don't want to start a fight here, but they're the Penn State of the SEC.
Ouch. Ouch. Very ouch, baby. That's a terrible Austin Powers impression, but ouch.
But anytime they go and they play a team on their level or ahead of them, they just don't perform. And it's not that they're not good, and it's not that they're not well coached. I think James Franklin's a hell of a coach. I think Penn State's a very good team. I think Lane Kiffin's a really good coach. I think Ole Miss is a hell of a team. But for whatever reason, when those two schools, home or road, go up against a big dog, they just don't ever come through.
No.
And it's almost like, look, I live in Dallas-Fort Worth. The Dallas Cowboys have been bullies for years. The Cowboys bully mediocre and bad teams, And when they get up against the big, bad San Francisco 49ers and that super tough 5'11" quarterback known as Brock Purdy, they cower, right? It happens. And that's what Ole Miss is. That's what Ole Miss is. Ole Miss is, they're bullies. And bullies eventually have somebody bigger and stronger that stands up to them, and they cower.
Yeah, I think this game is all about Georgia finding themselves again. I mean, you could see it start to happen in the fourth quarter in Jacksonville against the Gators last week. Like they kind of, it was FAFO for the first three quarters, and they almost found out. And then they got it together. Like, this has been the story of Georgia in how many spots over the last 2 or 3 years. They mess around, and then occasionally they know exactly when they have to step on the gas. I think you're going to see a lot of carryover from last week's fourth quarter and the world's largest outdoor cocktail party into this one. And I think they're going to just sort of impose their will. I really like the under on this one, Choppy. 54.5, 55.5. It's actually ticked up a little bit later in the week. I love the under here. I think Georgia's just going to grind this one to a halt if they have to, hit the occasional big play, and cover the 2.5 and probably take care of business. I liked Ole Miss a lot at the beginning of the year, but at this point, I think you make a really good point. They are just not here to play with the big dogs. In this case, literally the dogs in Georgia. 4 Eastern on Fox Saturday afternoon. Colorado, Texas Tech. Chaos has reigned supreme at the top of the Big 12. The Buffs got to sit back and watch it last week, right? Kansas State loses. Iowa State loses on the at home, no less, to this very same Red Raiders team. Colorado's offense, no question their offense can handle things, right? It's Shedeur, it's Travis Hunter, it's 31 points a game. It's top, third of the country in points per drive, up tempo. They know exactly what they're doing. The Texas Tech defense, to be quite honest, is a dumpster fire inside of a dumpster fire right now, even though they played well against Iowa State because they're bad and they're hurt. I think this sets up really nicely for Colorado to further assert themselves in the Big 12 title race, or to stay alive in it at the very least. Only laying 4. I know it's on the road. I really like the Buffs in this spot. I like Prime.
Struggling here with this one. Tempted on the over. On the over. I just don't trust Colorado, though, away from home. They're a very, very difficult home team. You got the altitude. Texas Tech they're not that bad. And they're in a position to where both teams can make the Big 12 championship game. So you've got to factor that one in. So I don't have a great feel on this one. I could absolutely see Colorado winning this by 10. And I could see Texas Tech winning by 5 or 6. So I don't have a great feel in this game at all.
For what it's worth, 4 of the last 7 games in Lubbock have gone over the total. For whatever reason, it's basketball on grass there, and we'll see if that continues Saturday afternoon. Saturday night, I mentioned it. It's a win-or-go-home game between Bama and LSU. Number 11 tied. They've got 2 losses already. LSU, number 14 in the country, 2 losses, just one in the SEC, but this is still a win-or-go-home for them as well. I'll be honest. I have no idea which way to go on this one, RJ. I'd like to believe that all of the big games played at Bama over the last decade and a half, certainly over the last couple of years, as it applies to the players that are still on the roster, they will rise to meet the occasion and meet the moment in this opportunity. I also don't like anybody short of maybe Georgia. I don't like anybody going into Death Valley on a Saturday night. Sorry. This is Brian Kelly. This is one of these games he will be prepared for to a T. Now, does he get the best out of Garrett Nussmeier this week? That's always a question, but it feels like he's found a little bit more consistency over the last 3 to 4 weeks. I know there's people in Baton Rouge who are disappointed that he hasn't been as good as they expected him to be this year. But I think in a game like this, if we're talking quarterbacks, Milroe is definitely the better one. I think, unfortunately, Bama's going to have to ask Milroe to do a lot more than LSU is going to have to ask Nussmeier to do. It's why if you're giving me LSU at home at night in this spot and a field goal, I'll take the Tigers.
Yeah, here's the issue with this one. Alabama trailed in 6 straight games going into their game against Missouri. 6 straight games they trailed in. That is not a recipe for success.
Can only fight back so many times.
Yeah. And in the 3 games that LSU played against ranked opponents, Garrett Nussmeier has got 6 interceptions in the 3 games against ranked opponents: USC, Ole Miss, and A&M. There's a give and take here. There's a give and take here on this one, and the issue becomes, can Alabama avoid getting down too much of this game? I think the under might be in play. I really 58 is a lot of points.
Yeah,
I think a lot of points.
I think that you know what though? Like the game script that you're kind of alluding to here, I think sets up for an over. Bama gets down. Bama's got to come back. Bama tries to hit big play after big play after big play, and some of them do hit, right? And then before you know it, this thing's going into overtime, tied at 31 or something. And that feels like LSU's defense should be better than that. And if they get a lead of more than 1 score against Bama, they should be able to hold them off. But I don't think that doesn't mean Bama doesn't take shot after shot after shot and hit on some of them and end up taking this thing over the number. But I see what you're saying. For what it's worth, 4 of the last 5 LSU games have gone under. But when you talk the last 5 LSU-Bama games, they've gone over. So something about these two teams getting together. Late night, out west, they call it the Holy War, a 10:15 Eastern, 8:15 Mountain Time kickoff between the aforementioned number 9 BYU Cougars, undefeated, 8-0 and 5-0 in the Big 12, against Utah, who have been a massive disappointment this year. Look, a lot of it has to do with Cam Rising's injury problems. I get it. They have not been able to figure out the quarterback position in Rising's absence. But last year, they dealt with Cam Rising injury issues and still played decent football. This year, they haven't been able to find it because they haven't been able to figure out their quarterback. BYU, on the other hand, has a quarterback. Am I allowed to say his nickname without getting in trouble, do you think, Choppy? Am I allowed? Because he says it all the time.
If he says it. If he
okay.
says it, I think you're okay.
BYU, he calls himself. Jake Retzlaff. That's what he calls himself.
Yeah, he does.
He wears his Star David pendant under his pads. You see it pop out occasionally. He has embraced the idea of being a Jewish quarterback at an all-Mormon university and all-Mormon school. So, by all means, if it's working for you, go with it, Jake. I'm here to back it up. Very good, if not elite offense at BYU. Top 50 in terms of EPA per play, yards per play, points per game. The total, really, really low on this one. 40.5, and it hasn't moved all week. I'd take a look at the over. I like BYU to cover it's come down to 3 as well, to cover the 3 in this one. It was out as far as 4.5 earlier in the week.
Man, I'll tell you this. At 3, I am all over BYU. I know it's a rivalry game and all that stuff. Dude, Utah's not good.
No.
They lost to Arizona. Like they're not a good team. Arizona lost to BYU by 20.
Yeah.
This is, and I know you can't use the transitive property or whatever it's called, but Utah's just not good, right? When you don't have a quarterback in this NIL universe that we're in, you just can't compete. And this is one of the rare games Utah plays. They don't have the altitude advantage, right? There's no advantage. It's a net zero. BYU plays at the same altitude. You don't have the altitude advantage. You don't have the weather advantage. Everybody who plays on BYU has basically played a game at Utah. So you don't have I think this is an easy cover, and I like the over. I'm with you. This is one of those games that could be like 38-14 or 21.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. What's interesting, last 5 games as a dog, Utah 1-4 straight up in those games. Last 10 games as a favorite, BYU 8-2 straight up, but they've only covered in half of those, in 4 of those games. So maybe that's why that number's come down from the early 4.5 to just a field goal game now. Look, it is a rivalry game. I think, look, this is one of those ones that could be tight down until we get to the last 6 to 8 minutes. BYU gets the football. They're up by a touchdown. Jake Retzlaff moves the offense down the field. They're up by 2 touchdowns now. Utah tries to do something. The ball gets turned over. There's a quick possession. BYU gets it back. They go down the field. They score again, or there's a field goal. This could be one of those ones that is a tight rivalry game for 3 hours, and then you get to the last 5 minutes, and BYU puts on a couple more touchdowns and makes it look like more of a game that we're talking about here, the over and a healthy cover. Somebody got a vote of confidence, more than a vote of confidence even. His bosses said, yeah, you know what? You sucked this year, but you're coming back. We'll talk about that. And also, we'll put you on upset alert as well before we get you our best bets all next right here on BetQLU.
You've been listening to BetQLU, presented by BetMGM. If you missed any of the show, listen back anytime on the new and improved Odyssey app.
Are you ready, sir? Start your engines. Let's go.
Astros money line versus the Marlins. Johnny Cueto, no thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. How does this affect me personally?
Which is absolutely bonkers to me.
If you do the middle school math, is 117 yards per game that you gotta post each and every weekend.
I knew it.
Who has the upper hand? Do we think it's going to be the offenses, or do we think it's going to be the defenses?
How about Saturday's game? Let's just throw a random game out here.
Like, I don't want to put faith in NC State. There's a chance we'll lose outright. Who knows? Jinx is definitely not paying attention right now. He's just vibing to the music.
Are you ready for the most interactive sports gambling show? Introducing BetQL's Send It In with PJ Glasser. We want to hear from you. Send It In is about your picks, your trends, and your fades. Share your thoughts, predictions, and your best daily best bets with the Send It In community. Set your reminders, mark your calendars, and get ready to send it in on weekday afternoons at 1 Eastern on Twitter, YouTube, and Twitch. On your home for wagertainment, the BetQL Network, presented by BetMGM.
Go for the betting cycle on BetQL with Cody Decker,
Cody Decker, former professional baseball player, turned professional smartass on the radio.
sports handicapper Rob Brown,
When Penix Jr. plays USC, he's getting 400 yards.
cycling all the top plays,
And Cody Decker, I think Florida can cover today.
and one outrageous show parlay.
1, 2, 3.
Let the chaos begin. It's Bet for the Cycle on the BetQL Network, presented by BetMGM.
Some would say that maybe he'll be chasing Super Bowl MVP. Really makes me angry that, like, Knicks fans can't have anything. We've been bad for... I get it. Now it's, okay, 100% of attention on 9 million games tonight. It's a playoff game. We've seen this movie before, and we know how it ends. And it ends with absolute disaster. But I'll tell you, that's fun. But the most fun thing about betting on sports for me is this. Like, hey, there's no tomorrow. And now, come on, put Pickett in.
Are you ready, sir? Start your engines. Let's go.
Astros money line versus the Marlins. Johnny Cueto, no thank you.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. How does this affect me personally?
Which is absolutely bonkers to me.
If you do the middle school math, is 117 yards per game that you gotta post each and every weekend.
I knew it.
Who has the upper hand? Do we think it's going to be the offenses or do we think it's going to be the defenses?
How about Saturday's game? Let's just throw a random game out here.
Like, I don't want to put faith in NC State. There's a chance we'll lose
13.
outright. Who knows? Jinx is definitely not paying attention right now. He's just vibing to the music.
Are you ready for the most interactive sports gambling show? Introducing BetQL's Send It In with PJ Glasser. We want to hear from you. Send It In is about your picks, your trends, and your fades. Share your thoughts, predictions, and your best daily best bets with the Send It In community. Set your reminders, mark your calendars, and get ready to send it in on weekday afternoons at 1 Eastern on Twitter, YouTube, and Twitch. On your home for wagertainment, the BetQL Network, presented by BetMGM.
Some would say that maybe he'll be chasing Super Bowl MVP. Really makes me angry that, like, Knicks fans can't have anything. We've been bad for... I get it. Now it's, okay, 100% of attention on 9 million games tonight. It's a playoff game. We've seen this movie before, and we know how it ends, and it ends with absolute disaster. But I'll tell you, that's fun. But the most fun thing about betting on sports for me is this. Like, hey, there's no tomorrow. And now, come on, put Pickett in.
Let's get back to BetQLU, presented by BetMGM.
Best bets still on the way. What do we like the most this week? Week 11 of the college football season as we're down to the final month. My God, I can't believe we're here already. Alongside RJ Choppy, I'm Chris Mack. John Martin does have the week off here on BetQLU, live coast to coast on the BetQL network every Friday night and Saturday morning, wherever you may be in the world, whenever you need us in podcast form, right there inside your free Odyssey app, AUDACY, or wherever you get your podcasts, and of course on YouTube as well. Just search for the Odyssey Sports Channel. You can watch the show there as well. Get a ton of info on the bottom scroll and the sidebar as well for each of the games that we're previewing. Went through a handful of them just a few moments ago here on BetQLU, presented by BetMGM, the sportsbook born in Vegas. And as mentioned, we'll get to our best bets, get you on upset alert as well. But this happened, Choppy. I remember talking about him, laughing at him back, I want to say it was week 1 or week 2, after one of those ugly losses early in the year, when he couldn't even successfully open a water bottle. Billy Napier is going to be back as the head coach of the Florida Gators. And I don't get it. Like, look, Florida has struggled over the last couple of years to find any kind of identity. It was extra difficult because, you know, they're always going to have that recruiting battle in state against Florida State and Miami. They're also in the SEC, which makes it very difficult. But I shouldn't say never. I have not seen a Florida program sort of this adrift in mediocrity in a long time. And it just surprises me that, again, they're probably going to end up with a losing record, probably going to end up 5-7. They will struggle to end up bowl eligible, given the final 4 weeks of the season against Texas, LSU, Ole Miss, and Florida State. They're going to have to win 2 of those, and I don't know which 2 they're going to win. FSU, okay, who else? Anyway, I don't understand bringing them back. I don't. It just doesn't add up.
I'm in love with this. I love it. I'm ecstatic. I'm ecstatic about
All
this.
right, Tennessee fan.
This is phenomenal. You know, here's the thing. I wanted Billy Napier to coach Tennessee over Josh Heupel. I was upset. And a lot of Tennessee fans were, because, Billy Napier is a Tennessee guy. He's from Cookeville. And it's not far. It's about an hour from Knoxville. He is a Tennessee guy. He wanted that job, and they went with Josh Heupel. And I was like, no. I mean, he can't even win at like UCF. And how wrong I was. I absolutely love this. I'll be honest with you. The Florida Gators are like the Dallas Cowboys of the NCAA. They have lowered their standards. The Florida I knew got rid of Ron Zook way before they would have gotten rid of Billy Napier. The Florida I know, I mean, I've always maintained that the University of Florida is the best job in America with the University of Texas. You don't have to get on an airplane.
Yeah.
You walk outside your campus and say, hey, we need this, this, and this. Where
do we want to drive to today to recruit? Yeah.
Right? You have the most fertile recruiting ground you could possibly ask for. Florida and Texas, most fertile recruiting grounds. You got money out there. You know what? Now, Texas might have more. Florida's got plenty of it. The other two schools in your state, in Miami, is good. Florida State's good, but you're still the University of Florida. The difference is that, Oklahoma goes in and has stolen a ton of Texas talent, and Alabama and Georgia have gone in and stolen a lot of Florida talent. But I've always thought that Florida and Texas are the two best jobs in the country, and they've underachieved, or at least Texas has. Florida, they've not underachieved. They've just lowered their standards. There's no reason he still should be employed after this year.
That's a really good way to put it. They've lowered their standards to the point where they're like, yeah, sure. Who else? The old classic, who else are we going to get? Well, I'll tell you who else. You're Florida. You're in the freaking SEC. Take your pick. Florida. That's a great way to put it. They have lowered their standards to the point where Billy Napier gets to stay around for at least another year just by default. And again, they're probably not even going to be bowl eligible this year. If they do, it'll be a minor miracle if they win 2 more of their final 4 games to end up bowl eligible. Speaking of things that would be upsets, last week we saw a handful of upsets. I guess technically it wasn't an upset as Ohio State was favored, but Penn State lost at home. Number 3 team lost to the number 4 team in the country. But legitimate upsets. A&M demolished by South Carolina. Iowa State falls at home to Texas Tech, which we mentioned. Clemson loses to unranked Louisville. Oh, Dabo. Kansas losing at Houston in a downpour. Which one of these surprised you the most, Choppy, or I guess had the biggest impact on the way you were looking at the college football picture going into the week?
Well, the A&M game probably had the most impact because that was the one game that took a team out of the playoff. And although I guess you could make the argument that Iowa State did as well, but losing against South Carolina. Look, we've seen teams go to South Carolina. That's a tough place to play.
It is,
and South Carolina's they've played solid football right now. South Carolina has played decent football. That's an interesting game this week with Vandy that they've got. But that is, that's disappointing for A&M. I mean, you just can't. I mean, you destroyed Missouri. You had everything in front of you. You had to play an unranked South Carolina team and an unranked Auburn team on the road, and then you get Texas at home, and you're in. You're in the SEC championship game. And we all know if you make it to Atlanta, or if you make it to the Big Ten game in Indy this year, you make it to Indy, you are going. If you make the Big Ten championship game, you're going to the playoff. And if you make the SEC, you're going to go to the playoff. And they blew it. That was the most disappointing, most notable one for me.
Yeah. I'll be honest. The most notable was also, I don't want to say the least surprising, because I could have seen it coming a mile away that Clemson was going to lose to Louisville. It wasn't necessarily shocking, but I think the most notable because it shakes up the picture in the ACC to the extent that I don't know if that's a 2-bid league anymore. I don't think it is. I think short of SMU beating Miami in the ACC championship game, I don't think they're getting it more than one team in. I think it's Miami, and then you're going to have some sort of weird circuitous route to getting a second team in.
Good word. Yeah, it's like, I mean, if Miami, Yeah, if Miami has one loss, are they ahead of a 2-loss Alabama? Are they ahead of a 2-loss Tennessee? Are they ahead of a 1-loss Indiana? Are they ahead of a 2-loss Ohio State if Ohio State finds another loss? Is the 1-loss Miami ahead of those teams?
Yeah, I think probably just because they've lasted undefeated this long. I think that, whether rightly or wrongly, would count for something. If the only loss came in a conference championship game, whether it was a great opponent or not, in SMU, that could be debated, certainly. I think it would still get them in, and I think SMU would obviously go as well as the conference champ. Yeah.
One loss Miami or 1-loss Indiana, who gets in?
Is Miami's only loss in the ACC championship game?
Yeah.
And
Indiana's is against Ohio
that's brutal.
State.
Oh my God. Can I kick Notre Dame out then?
Sure, you can do whatever you want.
Okay, good. Yeah, I kick Notre Dame out and I keep Indiana and Miami. How about that? Okay. You got anybody on upset alert this week, real quick, before we get to our best bets? We talked about BYU, Utah. Indiana's laying 2 touchdowns against Michigan. Iowa State's on the road at Kansas. Clemson on the road at Va Tech. Anybody in particular jump out to you?
Well, I mean, Clemson Va Tech that's a tricky one. Colorado Texas Tech is a tricky one. I'll tell you one that really kind of gets at me is, man, there was a time this year where I was like, Georgia Tech is dangerous. Now, I don't think that's anymore, but Miami has not played tremendous football this year. And Georgia Tech always freaks me out.
That was one I had an eye on as well earlier in the week, and I thought about it, and I rolled it around inside my head, and I thought, that number, you're getting up to 11.5. Miami could win this comfortably by 10, and Georgia Tech still covers. And you're right, they played some really good football earlier in the year. Miami has slipped a bit as of late, I think, despite still getting away in some spots. That's not a bad look, especially at that number. If you were to give me another half point, give me an even dozen, and I think I might jump on that before the end of the week, if we get there before kickoff. Speaking of which, before kickoff, we got to get you our best bets. I feel like we should probably I don't know. I feel bad that John's not here to pick some random American Conference or CUSA game, but I didn't really find one that I liked. What do you got?
I know they've got some injuries, but I really like Iowa State -3 at Kansas. Kansas is not very good, and that number just doesn't. I don't get it. I really think that this is a much bigger point spread than the 3 points. I think this is like 6 to 8 points. And again, I know Iowa State's been dealing with some injuries. They just lost to Tech, but Kansas is not very good. Give me Iowa State -3.
Well, the loss at home to Tech is exactly why I would be on Iowa State in this spot. This is a huge bounce back spot for them. On the road, you get your bleep together and you handle your business against a team that you're clearly more talented than. Again, injuries aside, like you mentioned, I think it's a great spot for Iowa State. And as long as it doesn't go farther than 3, I think it's a great look. As long as you don't get out past 3, I think even like you said, you could get me out to maybe 4, 4.5, and I'd still be comfortable with it. Probably have to get me closer to 6 before I get uncomfortable with it. You'd have to get me to a much bigger number for me to be uncomfortable with my best bet. Indiana. I've rolled with them the last 2 weeks. I'm rolling again, baby. They win. Google them. They are hosting Michigan. I don't care that they're laying 2 touchdowns in a hook. Absolutely. Give me Indiana. They have not won a game this year by less than 14 points. That happened twice against Washington and Maryland at home. Tell me that Michigan is really that much better than Washington. They're not. 14.5, give it to me. Indiana's going to hang 30 on Michigan, which is a lot compared to what other people have put on Michigan. I absolutely love the Hoosiers at home, laying 14.5 against a Wolverines team that may not score more than 13 points this weekend. So I'm going to go with Curt Cignetti again. Again, he wins. Google him. We'll go over everything that happened in Week 11. Get you set for Week 12 next week as well. Don't forget, you can always download us inside your Odyssey app. Just search for BetQLU, presented by BetMGM.
You've been listening to BetQLU, presented by BetMGM. If you missed any of the show, listen back anytime on the new and improved Odyssey app.
Are you ready, sir? Start your engines. Let's go.
Astros money line versus the Marlins. Johnny Cueto, no thank you. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. How does this affect me personally?
Which is absolutely bonkers to me.
If you do the middle school math, is 117 yards per game that you gotta post each and every weekend.
I knew it.
Who has the upper hand? Do we think it's going to be the offenses, or do we think it's going to be the defenses?
How about Saturday's game? Let's just throw a random game out here.
Like, I don't want to put faith in NC State. There's a chance we'll lose
team.
outright. Who knows? Jinx is definitely not paying attention right now. He's just vibing to the music.
Are you ready for the most interactive sports gambling show? Introducing BetQL's Send It In with PJ Glasser. We want to hear from you. Send It In is about your picks, your trends, and your fades. Share your thoughts, predictions, and your best daily best bets with the Send It In community. Set your reminders, mark your calendars, and get ready to send it in on weekday afternoons at 1 Eastern on Twitter, YouTube, and Twitch. On your home for wagertainment, the BetQL Network, presented by BetMGM.
Go for the betting cycle on BetQL with Cody Decker,
Cody Decker, former professional baseball player, turned professional smartass on the radio.
sports handicapper Rob Brown,
When Penix Jr. plays USC, he's getting 400 yards.
cycling all the top plays,
And Cody Decker, I think Florida can cover today.
and one outrageous show parlay.
1, 2, 3.
Let the chaos begin. It's Bet for the Cycle on the BetQL Network, presented by BetMGM.
Some would say that maybe he'll be chasing Super Bowl MVP. Really makes me angry that, like, Knicks fans can't have anything. We've been bad for... I get it. Now it's, okay, 100% of attention on 9 million games tonight. It's a playoff game. We've seen this movie before, and we know how it ends. And it ends with absolute disaster. But I'll tell you, that's fun. But the most fun thing about betting on sports for me is this. Like, hey, there's no tomorrow. Now, come on, put it in.
Are you ready, sir? Start your engines. Let's go.
Astros money line versus the Marlins. Johnny Cueto, no thank you. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. How does this affect me personally?
Which is absolutely bonkers to me.
If you do the middle school math, is 117 yards per game that you gotta post each and every weekend.
I knew it.
Who has the upper hand? Do we think it's going to be the offenses, or do we think it's going to be the defenses?
How about Saturday's game? Let's just throw a random game out here.
Like, I don't want to put faith in NC State. There's a chance we'll lose
team.
outright. Who knows? Jinx is definitely not paying attention right now. He's just vibing to the music.
Are you ready for the most interactive sports gambling show? Introducing BetQL's Send It In with PJ Glasser. We want to hear from you. Send It In is about your picks, your trends, and your fades. Share your thoughts, predictions, and your best daily best bets with the Send It In community. Set your reminders, mark your calendars, and get ready to send it in on weekday afternoons at 1 Eastern on Twitter, YouTube, and Twitch. On your home for wagertainment, the BetQL Network, presented by BetMGM.
Some would say that maybe he'll be chasing Super Bowl MVP. Really makes me angry that, like, Knicks fans can't have anything. We've been bad for... I get it. Now it's, okay, 100% of attention on 9 million games tonight. It's a playoff game. We've seen this movie before, and we know how it ends. And it ends with absolute disaster. But I'll tell you, that's fun. But the most fun thing about betting on sports for me is this. Like, hey, there's no tomorrow. Now, come on, put pig in